Hey there, friend. Welcome back to another episode of the Doing What Matters podcast. I'm your host, Teresa McCloy, and I am thrilled to be with you today as I have a guest on today. Ashley Fillingim is joining me here in just a few minutes to share with you. The reason I wanted Ashley to be on the show was she talks so much from a very vulnerable place about her whole entire life story. And if you've been listening to the podcast for very long, or if you're a brand new listener, you realize that life story is something that I think matters so much as we do this journey to live from a place of rest, not rush. In fact, I so believe in life story work that just recently in this past year, we've added in a new tool called One Life Maps. And that One Life Maps tool is all about working on connecting the dots in our story and how connecting those dots into seeing places where God is moving and working in our story is so important. And as Ashley shares her story today with you and the journey that it's taken her on and the work that she does now, I think you're really going to resonate. She is just a beautiful soul, an amazing entrepreneur, and I think you're going to really resonate with her story. One of the things you may want to do is head over to onelifemaps.com and check out those life map tools. You might want to order a set of those tools and bring them along on your journey as you're discovering your own life story and how it matters and how it's formed you through nature and through nurture and through free will into the person that you are today. And so I just encourage you to head on over to onelifemaps.com and check that out. You also might want to go to our website, thereallifeprocess.com, and download our free needs and values assessment. That's also a great tool to dive in and begin to discover things about your real self. One of the things I love about the interview that you're going to listen in on between Ashley and myself is how much work she has done to discover her real self. We laugh and joke in the interview about she's such a researcher, but she has done so much work to discover her real self that she's been able to take her story of adoption and bring that thread through her story and identify why she does the work that she does now, how she's moved from one part of her career into another. And you are going to love listening in with this story with my friend Ashley. So let's get to it and let's listen in as I share with my friend Ashley and her journey and her story and connecting all the dots and pulling the thread forward. Well, Ashley, it is so great to have you here on the Doing What Matters podcast. Thanks for being my guest today.
Teresa, I'm so excited to spend the time just hanging out with you. It's a joy.
I know. Here we are. We both took time right before the holidays kind of kick off. We're both in down mode, so to speak. I know you're at the beach and I'm getting ready to take off as of tomorrow, but I was so excited to just get on and talk with you today. We're kind of going to go on a journey a little bit. You and I have known each other for, has it been a couple of years now that we've been in Mike Kim's mastermind together. I first heard Ashley speak at one of Mike Kim's events, and I was so just impressed by, number one, your legal knowledge, and I'll let you share why you know so much here in just a bit. And then, but more than anything, your ability to take legal things and make them relatable. So tell us a little bit about Ashley and why that matters to you, just who you are, what you're doing out there in the world.
Teresa, thank you so much. Yeah, I am a recovering big law attorney. I, sp- I spent 20 years at a mega law firm with offices not just all over the country, but all over the world. 10 of those years, I was a partner and I did litigation. I like to say big, nasty litigation, like things that were high profile in the news, bet the company, high stakes litigation. And I did conflict for a living, which if you know me, that might surprise you because that's not it. But I enjoyed the fight and it was a lot of fun. And so I did that for Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies for many years. And then I found myself a single mom, and it just didn't make sense to be on an airplane every week to New York or DC
Mm.
or whatever far flung place that the litigation was based in. I live in Atlanta with my children, but I was on an airplane almost every week. And so I needed to find something else to do. And I had this group of friends that I met in Italy. It was a bunch of women who were creators and entrepreneurs and coaches and consultants and chefs and, all the things.
Hmm.
And I was the only one on the corporate straight and narrow. And I'd been talking with them for a couple of years and ended up helping them in their businesses for for free because they couldn't, hire a law firm the size of mine. And I fell in love with helping people in this space because a lot of folks are building these beautiful businesses and putting so much heart and time and effort into it, and they don't know what they don't know in terms of how to protect what they're building. And
Mm.
so when I left the office, I traded my high heels for flip flops and started helping people in this space.
Oh,
So,
I love it. And there's so much story there that we're going to dive into. Um, my listeners know, if you're listening in, you know that I love to dive in to story. And so Ashley's been kind enough to come today and be willing to share just some of her journey of story. But I really want to go back a little bit further. You have a podcast as well. We'll put the link to Ashley's podcast in our show notes, and I'll let her share all about that at the end of the show today. But I want to go back a little further because you had a podcast probably less than a month ago that you had out right before Thanksgiving, I believe, or right around there, where you shared a really, really vulnerable part of your story of that really touched me because if you've been listening to the podcast for very long, you know that both of my children were adopted. And as Ashley came on and shared her story of adoption and also of kind of that reuniting with your sister, I would love to start there in your story if you don't mind. And we're going to kind of go through the thread and pull some threads all the way up to being that, what do you call it? Big law
yeah.
attorney. And you're in recovery from that. And then all the way through the thread to what you do now and how that journey happened. So, can you, in short version, because they can go listen to the whole podcast, can you talk to us a little bit about that adoption story and then that full circle moment of reuniting with your sister?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I was adopted in the 1970s as an infant. And in the 1970s, the Catholic Social Services, the process was that you were handed over to your adoptive parents, and the birth mom didn't know where you went, and the adoptive parents had no idea who you came from, and it was a closed record. And I was adopted into my forever family. I was an only child. I was very loved and I was very blessed, so blessed to be adopted by my mom and my dad. But I didn't know the first thing about my adoptive mom. And as a kid,
Mm-hmm.
you want to know and you want to ask questions, but if you were to ask questions there would be no answers because nobody knew. And also as an adoptive kid, and I think this is true for me, but I think it's true for many adoptive kids, is there's this sense that maybe asking would be hurtful.
Yes.
And in particular, as an adoptive kid, there's this, and I know it's not just me because I've researched it. I've researched the heck out of it to try to understand and get to the bottom of some of my
Mm-hmm.
emotions and dealing with all of that is, as an adopted kid, you feel this need to earn the benefits you've been given, the blessings you've been given. There's so much gratitude. And so there's this need to please. And so you don't ask questions and you make up these stories in your mind. I think I said on the podcast, I had this, you kind of instinctively know that your birth mom was probably young and couldn't keep you. And that was
Mm-hmm.
what it was. But in your mind, you make up all these stories. And I had this glamorous idea that my birth mom was in Hollywood having this fabulous career and that she would just drop by after an event in this, cream silk glamorous gown and tell me she loved me and be on her way and all would be fine. And so, yeah, that's kind of what goes through your mind as an adoptive child. But I never really looked and I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to hurt my parents. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to pause you right there because
Mhm.
our stories, and then we'll pick back up. As I was listening to your podcast, so I'm sitting on the other side, right, as the adoptive mom.
Sure.
And with both of my children, watching them process their storyline so differently. My son was also adopted through Catholic Charities, just like you. So when you talked about that, I was like, we were the token non-Catholic family, actually, that got on the list here in the state that we live in. I was the person who pursued, like, how do we work? Because at the time, they were pretty much one of the adoption places for us to work with. So as I was listening to your story, I was just resonating with the thread of knowing as an adoptive parent that both of my children were curious in different ways and being able to share with them their story to the best of my ability, and yet feeling that it would never be enough, no matter what I told them. Because I do really hear the pressure that you felt, because I would listen to people tell my kids, you're so lucky. You're so blessed. You have such a wonderful family, especially my daughter who's adopted from Romania, of just that pressure of you're so blessed, and my son too. But I always thought, gosh, that's hard.
Mhm.
That's a lot to have put up on you. And that fill in the gap, make up the story, as the adoptive parent, there was nothing I could say or do to fill in the gaps. So pick it up for me from when it kind of, you go through life trying to fill in the gaps as best you could, and then kind of what happens, Ashley.
Well, I want to say this about the fill in the gaps part too. And I think as I am an adoptive mom as well, and we'll get to that. But as an adoptive mom, I would think this is hard to hear.
Mm-hmm.
But as an adoptive child, there are pieces that just of me that didn't make sense as I was, particularly as a teenager. And I would think the way I approach this or feel about this or just my instincts are completely different from my adoptive parents. And then you get curious about, well, is this nature or is it nurture? So there's this sense of being loved, but also a sense of, do I belong here or where do I fit in?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And that, we, the genetics, the nature, nurture, all of the things, my children don't look anything like me. And I, as you're an adoptive parent too, like we're just different. Sometimes I laugh and say it probably saved my relationship with my daughter because we weren't anything alike in the teenage years. And so we could stay friends more than, oh, you're just like me. So there are the positive sides of all of that as well. But yeah, you just can't fill in all the things. And so there's a lot of that loneliness, I think, for children that come into a home that they're not like anyone else. Like there's a uniqueness and a special, but there's also a loneliness, I think, as well.
I think that's a good way to put it. So here's what happens next. Nothing happens next. I said a prayer over it. I didn't look. I let it be. I didn't want to upend someone's life. I thought, giving up a child has to have been hard enough. I just need to let that rest. And then I was pregnant, and I have a daughter that I birthed, a daughter of my own. And after the birth process, it shifted something in me. And I thought, I cannot fathom what it would be to give this child up. Like I grieved all over again for my birth mother, because I just couldn't wrap my head around what that would have been for her. And so I thought, well, I'll look. By now, the internet is in full swing.
Yeah, it's all opened up.
It's all there. So I'll just put in my birthday and the city I was born in, Mobile, Alabama, and I'll see what comes up. And if somebody's looking for me, then I'll respond. But if nobody's looking for me, I'm not going to hire an investigator. I'm not going to go through all of this and upend someone's life. So I did a quick little search. I was really nervous, and nothing came up. And I looked again a little deeper, and nothing came up. And so I said a prayer over it, and I let it go. And I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. It was not. I was in the middle of a very heated divorce, unfortunately. And in the divorce, my mother-in-law was very concerned that I would be losing family and wouldn't have them any longer, and that I needed more family in my life. And I'll tell you, at this point, I was kind of tapped out on family. But,
Yeah.
So it was over Thanksgiving in 2016, and the kids and the ex-husband and I were sort of doing a last hurrah, and we'd been to the North Georgia mountains, which I know that you love. It's a beautiful place. And it was the Sunday after Thanksgiving, and we were sitting over chips and salsa, and he was looking at his phone, and I saw his face go white. And I kind of just let it be. And he said, "My mom just found your birth mother."
Oh my goodness.
And I was not looking. And we had more than enough to say grace over at that point in our lives. And the focus was on the kids and figuring out what to do next. And so I really didn't say anything. And he said, my mom thought you needed more family. So she kind of put in haphazardly your birth date and the city, and there it was. And there was a post on Facebook. And so I was completely giddy. I couldn't even keep my head straight. Get home, put the kids to sleep, get up, get back to the normal routine, go to work in the morning. And I run to the office. Like, I could not wait to get to the office. And I shut the door, and I took a deep breath, and I called the number on the Facebook post. And I spoke to a woman named Ashley, ironically.
Can't make it up, I'm telling you.
I can't make this up. And, there were a lot of things that had to be processed. We needed to call Catholic Social Services. My birth mom needed to give her consent. There were some questions that needed to be answered. But I will tell you, Teresa, within 10 minutes of talking to Ashley, we knew. And I mean, from the very beginning, we could complete one another's sentences, and we laughed and we cried, and we just knew one another. And it was so beautiful that in one of the hardest times in my adult life, this beautiful gift of a sister was sent my way. As it turns out, I have two sisters, Ashley and Chelsea. Each of us is from different misters. And my birth mom, Deborah, is no longer with us. I did get to meet her once before she passed, and she lived a hard and difficult life, but I have this gift of these two women in my life that are my sisters.
So I think one of the reasons that this podcast episode, and we'll link to it in the show notes, so you can go back and listen to Ashley tell this entire story on the podcast, because it's so vulnerable and beautiful and transparent. But for me that day, I remember I was driving on the interstate and listening to you. And part of my story that I've never shared is my daughter finding her birth family in Romania. And I talk a lot in the book that I wrote 2 years ago about, our son's journey with addiction, and he was also adopted, and just this focus on him. But when you just said that again, of in one of the most difficult times in my life, there was this story. So as we were walking in the worst of our son Eric's addiction, passed away in 2017. So this would have been in, I think, 2012, probably right in there. That summer, he was in treatment, and one of the many treatment programs that he had been in. And a few months before that, I had come home from, I was working at church at the time, and I came home from a service on a Wednesday evening, and my daughter was sitting on the couch, and she said, "Mom, look at this picture." And I said, "Gosh, that looks just like you." She goes, "That's my sister." And I went, my heart just,
Yeah.
I'm like, here we are holding this one story of my son and all of his struggle. And I do believe that much of the struggle that he had was not being able to know his entire story, and that identity piece of who am I and all of those things. It wasn't all of it, but it was a piece of the thread. And here sits my daughter going, I found, and then we have the translation issue and all of that, even 10, 11 years ago, it was totally different. So it's one of the reasons I'm grateful for Facebook is my daughter found her sister, and then found her brother and her other brother. And 3 months later, we were on a plane to Bucharest, Romania, while my son was in treatment, to meet her family. So one of my best friends, my daughter, and I flew, not knowing for sure even who we were going to meet when we got there. It was a huge risk. But as you were sharing your story, I just know, even for maybe someone who's listening today, we hope it gives maybe someone who needs that closure to a piece of their story, hope. But, just knowing that maybe there's a loop that needs closed, and, in God's time, that will be closed in whatever way that it might. I know it was a big deal for my daughter, and it hasn't all been perfect. It's hard. It's hard to reconnect, but just like you, even through a picture and a few back and forth, she knew immediately. And we went once. She just went back last year, took her husband, because part of her story, and I think this is another thing that I resonated with and that we'll continue to flesh out here as we talk, Ashley, is your story continues. So when she got married, one of her biggest desires was for her husband to meet her family in Romania, because it was a part of her biological story. And just so they saved up and went on their honeymoon a year after they were married, and he got to go with her to Romania, and they reconnected again with all of their siblings. And I love that she's been able to do that. I love that has given her that. And I'm grateful for you that you've had that in your story as well, of that thread. And I know it's not easy, because you don't know what you're walking into or what it's going to be, but that immediate connection. And am I right? You and your sister have stayed connected, and Ashley and Chelsea are.
Yeah. Yeah. It took a little bit longer to I have not met Chelsea in person. I hope to do so one day soon.
Mm-hmm.
It took a little longer for me and Chelsea to connect. She just had some other things going on in her life. But
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, I really don't think my birth mom, Deborah, was looking for me. I think Ashley was looking
Yes,
for
that
me.
was Annika's case as well.
Mhm.
Her siblings were looking.
And yeah, we text all the time. It took a few years because I I had a hard time trusting.
Mhm.
And Ashley just was so steadfast and loving and open and generous with her heart as I worked through it. And I don't know that I could have been as loving and generous and kind as she was to me as I sort of came in and came out and came in and came out and dealt with the processing of it. And Teresa, I'll tell you something that just touches my heart about you and your story, is how loving and open you are with your daughter and supportive in that. Because at least from watching my mom, that can't necessarily be easy. And one of the books that I read and one that I recommend all the time is 20 Things Adoptive Children Wish Their Parents Knew. And number 20 is, if I am curious about or want to find or want to love a birth parent or a birth sibling, it doesn't make you any less my
Mm-hmm.
parent. It doesn't mean I love you any less. I was just writing about this in my blog this week about enough. There is enough love to go around. And and the more people that we have in our lives that we love and that love us, it just expands. Love expands. There's plenty, and I know this as a mom of, in divorce. And my ex-husband is remarried and she has a huge family, and I feel so grateful that my children have more
Mm-hmm.
people that love them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always easy, but there's love there. So I just want to commend you for that.
Thank you. And I think I've always tried as an adoptive parent to put myself in my children's shoes to say, what would I want to know? And maybe it's my own natural curiosity, that I have, that I'm like, wow, like, we encouraged our son, even as he was struggling his addiction. If this would be helpful, let's figure it out. Let's find out. Because as you said, the courts have opened up. So many things have changed. There's so many ways to go about this discovery. And in his stubbornness, in his whatever, is like, no, I don't need to know. But yet, I always felt like it was just this open, and I hate to use the word wound, that sounds pretty drastic, but yet
Mhm.
I think there is, and the best things heal from the inside out. And, I just always felt like uh, I'm such a believer in story. And so much of the work that I do, even though I'm a coach, I coach a lot with business owners, I coach a lot with people, it always comes back to story and the stories we're telling ourselves, the stories we believe, whether they're true or they're not. And so, even though we could go on forever about these stories, I'd like to kind of shift a little bit. Even as you said, it took me a while to build my relationship with my sister because of not trusting, of not doing different things. And can you identify for you, Ashley? Because I think sometimes when people that are listening, if you're listening, if you can hear it from someone else that goes, oh, as I listen to Ashley's story, I see how it shaped and formed maybe the career path that she chose or different things. What could you name that shaped you from that story into as you moved into adulthood and made choices and decisions? What shaped you?
Yeah, I'm going to try to keep this positive because my path, well, let me put it this way. As an adoptive child, I told you at the beginning, there's this need to please, there's this need to be the A student, to sort of earn. And so I went into law. Look, I was that kid. I'm sorry, don't hate me, but I was the straight A student, and I was class president, and I, was graduated with honors and was president of this and that at Florida State.
You
And
were an
then
achiever.
yeah, and then I went to Emory and I finished at the top of my class and I got a job with a large law firm and I checked all the boxes.
Mm.
And and I'm very grateful that I was pushed to excel in that way, that I wanted to excel in that way, but I never took the time to say, what do I actually want to do?
Okay, well,
How
say that
yeah.
again. You never took the time to say,
What do I really want to do? Who do I want to help? What do I want my days to look like? I just kept checking the boxes, all the things, even down to marriage and two kids and the, you know, little house and perfect little neighborhood and all the things. There was
Mhm.
nothing wrong with any of those things, but I
No, there's
never took the
not.
time to say, what do I want?
Mhm.
Until sort of the rubber met the road and my world collapsed in many, many ways all at one time. And as I started putting the pieces back together, I said, whoa, I have been performing for so long. Is this what I want to keep doing? Is this what gives me joy? And you've watched me over the last couple of years. I've been grappling with it ever
Mhm.
since. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I've got it all figured out or that the path has been easy, but at least I'm asking the questions.
Yes, at least you're asking the questions. And, it doesn't matter. Every one of us that's listening in, or for you and I, there's usually always been something. For you, it's adoption story and it's different things, but there's something from back here that we carry to here, to the middle of life, so to speak. And it drives us either positively or negatively, or even, as you're sharing in your story, kind of a combination of both. Like, you're grateful that you achieved all those things and did all those things. Sometimes we would say at what cost, but yet it is your story and you're grateful for it. And then we usually have that, you know, it hits the fan moment. Uh, and it's different for all of us. And then we start asking these deeper questions. Is this what I want? What am I doing? Is this how I want the rest of my life? What do I want my days to look like? All of those important things. And as you're grappling with those, what are you discovering just right now? You don't have to have it all figured out, as you said, but what have you discovered?
Um, you know, I've gone back to sort of middle school me, or maybe starting back in fourth grade. I loved to write. I could get lost for hours in the process, and in high school, researching and writing, lost for hours. And I did a lot of that in my career. I did a lot of researching and writing, but at a certain point, and that was the part of my career I loved the most, but at a certain point, you graduate past that and you're managing people and you don't get to sit in the library and write.
Yeah.
So I've come back to that sort of original urge, and I don't even do it for business. I just write and share because it gives me joy. So that's been part of the process. Slowing down long enough to journal and start to ask, who am I and what do I actually like? And I've really taken the time to do that and to be more centered. And then I've messed some things up too. There are certain parts of my old world that I needed to take into my current world, like your processes, like the ability to set processes in place and implement and all of that was highly skilled at. Um, but as you start pulling that thread, some of those ways break down. And
Mhm.
so figuring out what to hold on to and what to release
Mhm.
has been part of that journey too.
The insight you just said there, Ashley, though, about who I was in middle school,
Mhm.
I hear clients say that all the time. There's something about that, maybe 8, 9, 10 year age, all the way until about the teenage years. Even though that junior high years are crazy, I do believe it's some of the time that we're our truest self. and we're old enough to go, I enjoy this, whether it's writing or music or acting or sports or whatever it is, like there's a true, like, I love this.
Mhm.
And we do it. And then somewhere along the line, we're told we shouldn't do those things, or there's another message that comes in that we should, excel and study or do whatever. But there's something in that age right there that's a beautiful place of discovering our truest self. I love hearing you say, I went back there and slowed myself down and used writing to heal yourself and do, for me, it's music. And
Mm.
I have to remember sometimes that, man, I love music and I love to sit and play the piano or write music or do whatever. That was an early childhood, junior high type, here's how I express my emotion type of thing. Like, how do I get out the junior high girl, right?
I also loved roller skating with my boombox in the driveway, and I haven't
Yeah.
quite figured out how to re-implement that in my life, but I'm working on it.
Jazzercise of some sort. Yeah. Something that you can, but there's a reconnection. So there's a tool that I use in some of the work that I do. These One Life maps is what they are. It's actually a tool that we purchased last year. And one of the maps I love is where you do your timeline of your story and you put dots on this map of significant things. And then you look for that connection and what you just talked about of reaching back to, because we could dismiss that as, oh, that's what I did as a kid. But there's still a longing and a desire for that same thing. And I think the writing you're doing with your blogs, the podcasting you're doing, what is that filling for you? What does that bring out for you, do you think?
There's this just a couple of things. There's this sheer need to create,
Mm.
unfettered. So when you are in quote big law, you don't get to have side projects like this. You don't get to um, throw your whole adoption story out for the world to hear.
Mm-hmm.
That just wouldn't be okay. And so this beginning to explore and share thoughts has been so interesting, and there's been a freedom that's come with it, and I'm still learning how that works. The other thing that's so important to me about it is what you've been talking about the whole time we've been talking today, and that is stories. I think stories are healing. Sharing our stories is very cathartic from a place of, like, not from an open wound, but from a place of, this is what
Yes.
I've processed and let me share it with you, because it normalizes things. We think that we are in isolation, and we are just sort of on this journey on our own, but then we hear other people share their stories, and we realize maybe I'm not alone. Maybe somebody else has gone through not the same thing, but something similar. So how did they process it? And what does that look like for them? And I love not only collecting my story, but other people's stories. I just learned so much.
I totally agree. I think one of the biggest freedoms I've experienced in life, and, I often say God kind of has to hit me upside the head sometimes to get my attention. And depending on your personality and how you're wired, one of the biggest freedoms I've experienced is the freedom of sharing my story.
Mhm.
And just being transparent. It's so much easier than trying to manage. And that's the word. It feels like all the time you're managing. Oh, I don't want anyone to know this, or I don't want them to know that. And, so even when our son's story, when he gets arrested and he's in jail and it's on the front page of your local paper, your pretty much story is out. And I say, that's God smacking me upside the head. But yet the freedom to say, I'm walking this with you. You're my son. I love you. Your dad and I are with you in it. Um, and also then what it told me about my own story, right? Because sometimes you have to do your own work, and how I was doing this workaholic thing to deal with all of my stuff. Yeah, the freedom in that when we can share it. no two stories, yours and mine, are exactly alike, but it's like it all belongs.
Yeah.
And it is who made us who we are today. It may not be who I am 10 years from now, but and then as business women too, I think there's, we'll just talk as two women. I think there's something for women that we feel like we need to present something that's all clean and polished and social mediafied or something. I don't know. And I just, the freedom of not doing that and being transparent, such a blessing. And so I appreciate that you're willing to go there and share.
And when you say that, what was so interesting is when I first started helping online content creators and coaches and this sort of thing. And I created an Instagram, which isn't very active now, called Kick Ash Law. And I found that while I was supposed to be on there sharing legal tips, I couldn't quite do it. I just wanted to share stories that had very little or nothing to do with the law, occasionally touch on it.
Yeah.
So I kind of just moved over to Kick Ash Life and started sharing stories. And maybe one day I'll share legal tips. But for the most part, I just followed my heart
Yes.
because that's where my voice wanted to take me. So off we
Well,
went.
and I find, and I, as we kind of talk more about the current work that you're doing, we're doing, I find people, yes, they come for coaching or for you to help them in their legal spaces or whatever. But in the end, we're all human beings. And many times connecting the dots of our story comes before we get to the work that we're really to be doing in the world in this current time. And we're constantly going back and connecting another dot and putting another piece in the puzzle. And I end up doing that so much with my clients too. And I think that's why I do value how much story matters. Because if we haven't connected all that dot, it's like looking at a puzzle on the table, right? And there's like 5 pieces that are down there on the floor somewhere, and we can't complete the whole puzzle. And yeah, I don't know. I think you and I both end up talking to people as much about their story as we do about what they might have hired us to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, a couple of things. So that connecting the dots, I don't know that work is ever done.
It
I think
isn't. It isn't.
always going to be, and accepting that and continuing the process is mission critical. But in my work too, this might surprise you, but a lot of legal work, how somebody shores up their business or how they protect their business, relates back to story. It relates to something in their childhood that they observed
Yes.
about their dad's business going under, or something that they saw a friend go through, or the reason they don't want to protect their business or think it's going to be okay goes back to story and history and experience. And so sometimes I can't do what I need to do until we get to the bottom of those stories.
Yes, I would 100% agree. When I work with business clients in particular, and they come to that roadblock of growth in their business or working with their teams or whatever it might be, there's a story that's underneath that, or the false belief that we're telling ourselves about that. So let's dive, if you don't mind, as we kind of turn the corner again into that, as to what you've seen as you've moved into away from big law and into this one-to-one, which I think is a story all in itself of your love of helping creators and coaches and online business owners and all of this in their legal work. As you move to that part of your story, what are some things that you see for your clients that does come up as to these are areas that a lot of people don't want to delve into, or they don't want to shore up, and it could be for all different kind of reasons. But what are some things that you really see for business owners, solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, that you see that's a thread?
The thread, two threads I see very distinctly is I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to spend the money on it. I don't want to spend the time on it. And it's just nothing's going to happen. It's going to be fine. going to be fine, 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 fine. So, ostrich, head in the sand. I'm just not even going to face it. Or another thing, and this is something I have come to love about folks in this space, I find that they want to figure it out on their own. They've started a business from whole cloth. They've patched it together themselves. They've learned how to create a website or how to do this or how to do that or how to get an email
We're
list.
all
or how
self-taught experts on everything.
And so I have had to shift some of what I do to be more teaching and here you go. And would you like to take a stab at this yourself? Because that's how folks prefer to operate. And I admire that pluck so much. And then sometimes the third thing you see is folks who a lot of times these are folks who've been in big corporations who are coming out of that. They just want somebody to handle it for them because that's what happened in their prior journey. And so you see that as well. But the first two are the bigger things that you see.
So the first one you said you see is somebody wants to do it themselves, or that's one of the things is somebody wants to do it themselves because they're a do-it-yourself kind of person. That's how they built their business. The second one is maybe fear of, is there a fear factor that ever comes in for people of, what if I don't have it all right? Or do you see entrepreneurs more on the do-it-yourself side?
The other piece of it is not fear. This is just not going to happen to me.
Okay, so it's the head in the sand piece.
Yeah.
This is not going to happen.
I don't need this. I'm fine. I'm doing business with friends or people that I trust.
There you go.
And I don't need to worry about this. Or my business isn't big enough yet to worry about this.
I've heard that quite often from people legally, as I work with. Well, that's for bigger business than it is for me. So it's the ostrich, the head in the sand. Yeah. Okay.
Or the do-it-yourselfer, which is great. I love that curiosity and that need to know. Yeah, you see that a lot.
But when you think about the do-it-yourself, or even, where can you sit in that helping? Where do you sit, I should say, in that helping the person do it themselves, but yet have someone like you on their team in that piece? Where can you come alongside the do-it-yourselfer?
I've kind of been revamping things in the last several months to address this issue, to create some forms with instructions that say, if you want to take a stab at this, here are the forms, here's a way to do it yourself. I've been very fortunate to teach from various stages or in mastermind groups to, do an hour of a drill down of here's what matters to your business. And here are the ways that you can figure it out and the places that you would go. Just because if you are a business owner, just the education piece of it itself is so critical of understanding what's there in place for you or what isn't in place that you might want to consider.
I love that. I love that. That connects to your story too, of researcher all the way along, right? I researched your adoption story, you researched in school. You're still researching for people and helping them figure it out. What are 3 places, Ashley, that you see that for a lot of these small business owners that you're loving to serve, that the legal side of things really is the most helpful? 3 places for them to pay attention to. What do you see in all that research you're doing?
Yeah. Okay. Let's list them. Number 1, creating a separate corporate entity. We'll cover that. Number 2, getting your intellectual property in place and understanding what that means for you. And number 3, contracts. Please don't roll your eyes. I promise they're important and I'll tell you why. Okay. You want to take them one by one?
Yes, let's do them one by one, because I don't know what your story is if you're listening, but probably you need all 3 of these and you need to look at them. So take us on the journey, Ashley.
Yeah. Very first thing, if you are a small business owner, please set up an LLC. You can figure this out yourself. You can go to the website in your state for the Secretary of State and establish an LLC. Now, there are various ways that you can set up a company. You could talk to an accountant about what structure might be best for you. But at the very minimum, protect your business by keeping your business as an entity separate from your personal assets. Please do this, because if something goes wrong in your personal life and you haven't created a separate business entity, they could come after your business assets. Or if something goes wrong in your business, then they could come after your personal assets. It will take you an hour at most and a few $100s. Just do it, get it in place, and renew it every year, and keep those things separate. So important. Number 2, your intellectual property. And by this, there are 3 types of intellectual property. There's trademark, which is your brand, copyright, which is your content, and then patent, which we don't need to get into, right?
Right.
So if you are starting a business and you go online and I don't know, that your domain name is available on GoDaddy or wherever you go. Just because the domain name is available does not mean that the brand name itself is available to you. So this is something you need to research. You can go on PTO, Patent and Trademark Office website, in a search engine called TESS, TESS, and do a general search. I would advise you, if you're going to invest a lot of money in the building of your brand, to at least consult with a trademark attorney. Teresa and I can get you references, and make sure that somebody isn't already using that brand name in the place you're using it. Because here's the deal. If you build a business and you make money using their brand name, they can sue you. And not only can they stop you from using the brand that you've built, they can collect from you the money that you earned using their trademark name. Okay, so
Now,
please
some
don't
of
do
you
that.
just went into fear mode when she said that.
Okay, take a deep breath.
So take a deep breath and don't. But this is
nothing
doing
that
the
can't be
due
worked through.
diligence of being a true business owner. And I think there's been this misconception out there for years that, oh, if it's an online business, you know, it's not a real business, brick and mortar. And it is. One of my biggest things is nobody's building a side hustle. I hate that word. I've been on that horse for a while, that you might have a part-time business, but you still have a business. Side hustle sounds hard. We're not doing side hustles. But I, as someone who wants to see your business do well and grow well, whether you decide to work at 20 hours a week or 60 hours a week, that's your choice. But build it with structure that you've protected and done it well. So don't go to fear mode. Stay in your research side of your brain. And so what's the third one? So we talked.
Well, I want to say on that, when I was
go ahead.
a new mom, I was reading a book on parenting, and the woman said, she was a British nanny, and she said, start as you mean to go on. And that's
So
simply
good.
all I'm saying, is start as you mean to go on. It's worth knowing. Number 3 is contracts. And contracts are simply relationships. It's what you and I have agreed to do. They build our relationship as we start to do business together. Let's say you're an online coach and somebody's coming into your coaching program. If you have a contract, you are setting expectations about the relationship. It gives you a chance to talk about how that relationship is going to flow. And if something breaks down in that relationship, because this does happen in relationships, we know this,
Yes.
then a contract is a relationship sustainer, because the debate, it diffuses it, because you've got something in black and white that says this is how we agreed the relationship was going to flow.
Yeah.
And it's at least a starting point to have tough conversations.
So the contract saves the relationship in many cases. My daughter, listen back to this podcast, she'll probably laugh at me, but my daughter works for me on my team. I also have a contract with her as someone who works on my team. We have a scope of work drawn up, and we have a contract, because everyone on my team is a 1099 contractor. And so I have a contract, even though she's my daughter. And it is because it saves the relationship. I have 2 very good friends who work for me. saves the relationships. I am a firm believer in contracts to value relationships. So love those three things. Let's name them again, if you would, Ashley, for three things that every small business owner, online, brick and mortar, whatever, needs to look at.
Yes. Number one, create a separate corporate entity, not a DBA, by the way, that's doing business as. That won't cut it. Create an actual separate corporate entity, an LLC. Number two, really start to understand trademark, which is your brand, and copyright, which is your content, and how to protect that. And number three, get some basic contracts into place. Contracts are an act of love. They really are.
Yeah. Thank you so much for naming those. And, just the story journey of your story, of your research, of your thoughtfulness, of your desire to do well in the middle of your life where you're like, I am achieving and I'm doing. And now as you turn full circle, I just see you loving others so well, Ashley. It's such an honor to know you. As I said, when I first saw you on the platform a couple of years ago and you were sharing about law, and I'm like, gosh, I need to learn this. I need to know. I had been given good direction. I did have a trademark and some other things in my brand, but I thought, you make it easy because you make it relational. And I'm not going to say it's fun. That would be going to extreme.
Oh, give me a chance.
I know you think it's fun, but I think the other side that I love about someone like you and how much you love the work that you do is it is so loving for you to help someone else to feel safe and secure in the business that they have had. And I just, I appreciate that so much about you, your passion for your work and your passion also to share your story. So thanks for being with me today, my friend, and just taking us on the journey of where you are right now and just how your work is coming full circle.
It is a joy. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to share both in the personal and the business side, because those things are so intertwined. We can't really pull them apart.
They all belong, as I say, they all belong, all of us. And when we try to separate them is when I feel like, especially at this seasons in our life, when we try to separate them is when it doesn't work anymore. So, it doesn't work if we try to compartmentalize. I do want, though, I know people are going to want to connect with you. So why don't you tell us what are some best ways and what are some things that you might have that people can get started just to know Ashley just a little bit better?
Yeah, if you want to hang out, I have the podcast. It's called the Kick Ash Life Podcast, where we speak nothing about law.
Great name, by the way. Just a great name.
Thanks. It's trademarked.
Of course.
Right?
Yeah.
Also, I have the Kick Ash Life blog, which is on Substack. And then on the business side, I have, if you want to reach out to me, I'm at ashley@sandstarlaw.com. We'll put it, I guess, in the show notes.
Yeah, we will.
Mm-hmm. And very soon, and probably by the time the podcast is out, we'll have a link for you to purchase some very basic forms like I was talking about with some instructions. If you are a do-it-yourselfer, we've got you covered.
Yeah, I love it. Ashley's actually partnering with a friend of ours, Mike Kim. And Mike is so good about saying, here's some great content, and he wants his audience to have it. And I know that he too just loves the work that Ashley is doing. And so they're going to partner together on some things. We'll have a link for that in the show notes of how you can get to that. And it's something new that's coming here in 2024. So for all you do-it-yourselfers, there's going to be some ways for you to do that. But reach out to Ashley, connect with her I just highly recommend if you're needing these kinds of services and you're like me, I am not a do-it-yourselfer. I would just as soon have someone do it for me so I make sure it's done right. Or maybe for you, just for time's sake, it's just easier for you to reach out to Ashley and have her do some of those things. I would highly recommend that you do so. And Ashley, thank you again for being so vulnerable. It's one of the things I love about you is you're on the journey constantly, as I am, just to discover how all those dots connect. We're never done. But I love being on the journey with you, friend, and watching you do it and doing it along with me as well.
You are a gift to me. Thank you for walking arm in arm. It means so much to me,
Oh,
Teresa. It
it's
really
great.
does.
And yeah, just have a blessed holiday. And yeah, thanks for being on the podcast today.
Thank you.
What a great conversation with my friend Ashley. I'm so glad that you got to listen in and hear her connect those dots in her story. And as a special bonus, Ashley actually sent over to us a link to some brand new templates that she has. You can check out that link in the show notes. It will take you directly to a discount that is built in for you as a listener here at the Doing What Matters podcast. If you're a coach, if you need contracts, if you host events, masterminds, those types of things, these links are going to be exactly what you need. And these resources are going to serve you well, save you all kinds of time and all kinds of money. Ashley is great at that. So you'll want to make sure that you check that link out in the show notes. Thank you again for listening to the Doing What Matters podcast. And remember that every ordinary day has an extraordinary moment. You just have to look for them. Have a great week, friend.